I saw a meme earlier about the Tom Joyner morning show. It was a there's a picture of this people in the back, this person in the back seat. It might have been a TikTok actually, and they were sleeping, and then they hear like a prank call because they used to do the prank calls on that show, and the person like jolts awake, and they're talking about how on the rides to school in the morning, regardless of where you're, whatever school you're at, you recognize those pranks, and they always woke you up because you're always too early. This is very relatable, I guess. It's funny. One of the things that you had wrote in your information form thing was about adjusting to stay-at-home life in general, and we were just talking about what headphones we use when we make calls, and that I think that does play a pretty important part. I mean, every time I come down here, you have the in-ear kind of sport headphones, and those have been the best, as opposed to like the Logitech or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny that on the ear and over the ear headphones are more comfortable.
Yeah.
But from a convenience standpoint, the in-ear ones connect a lot faster. I'm toggling between different machines and my phone, and so they connect more seamlessly from a Bluetooth. So it's more of an efficiency thing,
Yeah.
I can kind of count on them. I'm often running last meeting from a minute from one thing to the next. So having some headphones that can quickly adjust that's real agile and making the adjustment from system to system, is definitely a preference. And then I can kind of move around a lot more easily on them too, because they're Bluetooth enabled. So I can walk upstairs, I can use the bathroom, a lot more flexible. So comfort seems to be the driving factor.
Yeah, and I guess the setup that you got is pretty comfortable as well. I mean, I'd like that we shortened the desk. I think it fits this the vibe of the room a little better, and opens it up a little bit on this side, outside of the camera. But it's just you got the Dell for the government work, and you got the MacBook for the independent work. And you were talking weeks ago about trying to get all your information, all your stuff in the same place. Yeah. So, I mean, you said that smart sheets and different like programs and stuff like that was one of the ways to do it. But what else? What other ways were you trying to figure out how to merge all your stuff, your online stuff, and your stuff in general?
Well, the government is their systems are so closed by design. So concerned, rightfully so, to not ever leak information out. And so in today's world, it's about being open, about being transparent, it's about being fluid, like we just talked about with the headphones.
Yeah.
And so the government and kind of how we, secure our systems, prevents that. But, as close as I can get to kind of being able to collaborate and go back and forth, because I'm one person, right? So
yeah, I
will work persona, and then you have your, who you are outside of work, and the two often, kind of meld. And so it would be great to be able to, seamlessly go from one aspect to another. A lot of my work, things that I do to support my work, is personal things that I own, that I have on my personal systems. And so at least I can pull those things up now and kind of reference them when I'm working on the government thing. So government computers. So that kind of helps having them right next to each other. I am pushing internally to get the same type of application as you mentioned, smart sheets. So we're getting that internally for the government. And so that look and feel and having it within that secure network will be a lot like, having things at home. But it's definitely a challenge with closed systems, which is why it's interesting. I'm a big Mac person, as you know. And
yeah, so am I.
But Apple was kind of designed by Steve Jobs and gang to be a closed network where everything else is kind of open. But the integration within that closed network is so, all the different devices and software integrate so seamlessly. So, you can kind of go from your phone to your tablet to your desktop, on an Apple, so seamlessly and so easily. I like to kind of duplicate that on the government side as best I can.
Yeah.
But it is kind of working in two different worlds. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind
Two different.
I don't think I'll ever be able to totally bridge it.
Yeah. I mean, it's two different internal systems. Now, mind you, if you're probably working at I don't know, like a regular private sector job. I mean, they may be using MacBook, but even if they were using Dell, I would assume that they wouldn't have the same security restrictions. So you're talking about the Mac bubble, the ecosystem is Marquise Brownlee and all of them call it, and then the government bubble. And it doesn't matter what device that the government is using; it's just a bubble in itself based on the entity, and what it is. But that's crazy. I guess Smart Sheets. I mean, how do you use it? I mean, what applications does it have for your job specifically, and like what is that helping to provide?
Yeah. So any work, in my view, needs to be. You need to decide you're trying to achieve a goal. And I'm very goal oriented. So I look at work like life is like you want to achieve a goal, a work goal. You have, day-to-day work goals in your work unit that you need to do, regardless if you're in IT, your job is to kind of provide technology that's always available 24/7, that's running so that people can log on and do what they need to do. So that's our work goal, is to keep our systems up and running, and so that people can kind of go and do their jobs and leverage the technology to do their jobs. We have bigger goals on, every day we want to, as things change, the world change, as needs change in the organization, we want to be able to change with those, to change with the changing times. And so you have bigger goals to transform what you do now and make your future ready. And so those goals are a lot more abstract, so you can say, I want to be able to, like we were just talking about, I want to be able to work in a fully integrated environment where I can, pull information from anywhere on the internet, from any kind of system, as available at my fingertips on my machine to do whatever I want to do with it, to do with that information whenever I want to do it, right? So that's a goal. It's very abstract, but it doesn't speak to specifically how do I achieve it. And so with Smart Sheets, what that allows us to do is like take those abstract goals and kind of define them, because people need something to rally around, right? If we're trying to future-proof something or achieve some kind of future goal, you need something, you need people to kind of help you with that, and everybody needs to have the same shared vision. And so, we want to set a goal. We want to future-proof those goals, but it's very abstract. So what does that mean for every specific person? So each person then has tasks that they have to do to help achieve that goal, that shared goal that we have for the future. So we want to be able to document that, to get people to buy into what we're trying to do, the vision of where we want to go. And then we want to give them very discrete tasks that kind of help us achieve it. And I'll take the example for, as I like to run. So if I want to plan to run, I have a lofty goal. 6 months from now, I want to run in a marathon. And so there's a lot of things I have to do. I have to, I have to train. I have to figure out how to train properly. I have to get the right equipment. I have to get a schedule. I have to kind of look at my nutrition, things like clothing. You always need a support group for everything you need to do. People to kind of run with you, to kind of remind you to run, to encourage you, to kind of keep you going forward. So you have a bunch of tasks that you need to do to achieve this long-term goal, and then you put them into a schedule. And then over time, you work those tasks. You get your running shoes, you get your running plan, you go out and you do your runs. You record and analyze your results of your runs and how the progress that you're making. You do things like weight training and eating properly, things that's going to support you, learning how to hydrate, things like that. And you do them over time. And then eventually 6 months from now, the idea is that the goal, then you're able to kind of go and then achieve your result and successfully run the marathon. Well, it's the same at work, so we set a plan for something we want to do in the future. We have a bunch of tasks that we want to do. And then we collectively move towards completing our tasks so that we can achieve our goal in the future. So Smart Sheets will allow us to kind of do that, to set those abstract goals and to do specific tasks and track what everybody's doing, and everybody can see what everybody else is doing and the progress that we're making towards achieving our goal. There are a lot of applications that, do parts of that. You can do that in things like a Word document or Excel, but you don't have the same. How do you share that amongst a group? You have to send it from file to file, or put it on Google Docs or something, and let people edit it. It doesn't lend itself to kind of sharing collaboration. You can do it, but an application like Smartsheets allows you to integrate with all those other applications and pull all of the work that people do, regardless of where you're doing it, put it into one place so that you can move forward and achieve your goals, and everybody can see the progress. That helps us work more efficiently. It reduces the time that we take, improves our communication, it reduces the time that we take having to get information for people, because we can go to one place, find the information that we need. We can inquire of others in one place. Everyone can work from one place to kind of meet all of their needs to kind of move forward.
Yeah. And that the Smartsheets reminds me of a tool in the Microsoft Planner, very similar to that, but I feel like Smartsheets is probably a combination of the Planner thing, and then I think there's another Microsoft application where you can like schedule that over time, mm-hmm. or something like that. I'm not sure what the name of that one is, but I just want to peg into the idea of it's great to have all that stuff in one place, and it does make a more coherent unit. But it seems like that, I guess that's part of the struggle. You said you were trying to get it approved within the government bubble, as we were talking before. What if, I know the government has contractors like Deloitte and, tell us this. I don't know the name.
Allen Hamilton.
Yeah.
Lockheed Martin.
Oracle.
Oracle.
And I guess the difficulty, can you explain the difficulty of them using their own systems or being used to some things within their own contractor bubble, or do they have to adjust to whatever organization that they're in, and how does that interplay work, especially because you have so many hoops or red tape that you have to make sure is lined up for security?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think that each company has their own way of kind of communicating, collaborating, how they keep all their pieces together and working in unison towards a common goal. And then you're working for the client, in this case, the government, if you're a contractor. And then you kind of have to work within, because now you're part of their, I like the word you used earlier, ecosystem, as well as your own ecosystem. And so you got to navigate both as a contractor. And so even though if I'm a contractor and I'm 100%, assigned to one government agency, like most are, and I work there, all day, full time, they're my only active client. In the government space, that's how a lot of the work works. However, I still report and work for my contractor firm, and I still have to do things administratively. I still have to kind of report on my progress. I still have to meet with my management because I'm part of that I still have to get training in that organization as well as work in the other organization. So as a contractor, you're constantly navigating both and having to kind of maintain both of those ecosystems. And then the information, as a contractor, a lot of them they're private companies, so they have a little bit more flexibility as far as security and those kind of things, but they also have to meet government requirements, because if they're going to house government data about the contracts that they're working on, a lot of times they have to kind of adhere to the same standards and restrictions that the government has to do. And so they're having to navigate that as well.
So that must be especially difficult for them. Or, this is just a lot to juggle on both sides. On the government side, to make sure that they're compliant with all those things, and then making sure that the contractors are in compliance with their own rules and their own regulations. And it seems like a complex web. Mm-hmm. Or at least within the government.
Yeah.
And we haven't even said what organization you work for or any of that. I'm like, I mean, you can explain it if you want, but I also think like there's also like a
Yeah. Well, oftentimes
loops.
in the government, we can't do a lot of things commercially and represent the agencies that we represent without formal approval.
Right.
So, like for instance, if I was to speak at a conference or do a radio show or a podcast, I'm doing it, as a person and not as not in my official capacity
Right.
in the business. So, which is, one of my personal struggles with kind of working in the government is because there are so many restrictions on what you can and cannot do, which is counter to kind of how I choose to live and how I think I am. And so it's been a bit of an adjustment to kind of nap down for that. Now, they're a lot worse in some other agencies. I don't work for what they call an intelligence agency like CIA or NSA. And, and I've told this story a lot when I was in grad school. One of my colleagues in the cohort that I was in worked for NSA, and she would always make a point of saying she can't talk about where she works and what she can and cannot do. So I can talk a little bit more freely, not working in one of those intelligence agencies, but there is a level of scrutiny and a lot of things that we can't rep our agencies without official, approval from the agency to do so.
Yeah, I have friends from Navy, or Caleb and Jamil and Trey, that I'd love to have them on the podcast in any way, shape, or form. But they're military, they're Marine Corps and Navy, so they would probably. I mean, it is the government. They would operate in the same way, and we'd have to kind of dance around with, or if we talk generally and vaguely about the subject matter.
Yeah, well, you can't speak specifically, to your work, and generally speaking. So I work in IT, so I can't talk about IT per se in the government context. Of kind of what we're doing per se in my job. However, I can talk about anything else.
Yeah.
But, as an individual, I can riff on politics because I'm not representing, my agency, is I'm not in official capacity, so as a human being, I have a political view. I can share that. I can share my view on a lot of different things because I'm not repping that while we're at work and when we're representing the agency officially, government employees typically we have to be apolitical regardless of our political views. We can't espouse a political position. We can't wear any kind of paraphernalia or bring posters or anything into the workplace that kind of espouses a political view. You can't even have a bumper sticker like, I vote for, candidate X on your car and have that. Technically, if you have that in a government garage and it's on your car, one could argue that you're in violation of what they call the Hatch Act, which is a legislation that kind of governs, for government employees to be nonpartisan at work.
We were in a government building for performance, and we were in the cafeteria, and you were talking about the Hatch Act, and they had every news station on all of the screens, so nobody could say, "Oh man, you're only playing Fox News," or "Oh, you're only playing MSNBC," because everything is playing at once.
Yeah.
Now you could probably tell who reps who based on what screen they're looking at, but I mean that's in no way violation.
Yeah, and different agencies have different interpretations, like with the law and with regulations. The one thing about them, regardless of where we sit, is that they're subject to interpretation. And so different agencies interpret those things differently. In my agency, we tend to take the Solomon approach to those things. It's like, okay, we're just going to rotate all of the different, in this example, news stations, whether it's Fox, CNN, MSNBC, we'll rotate them all on some kind of regular cadence so that everybody kind of gets a slice. Other agencies don't care as much. They may just run one news link, Some agencies don't run any, because they just don't want to be perceived that way. So it's all a matter of perception and what people kind of complain about,
Yeah. It just reminded me of one of the guys that there's this person that works at your job who likes complaining on the company blog.
Yeah.
But it not even just within that. And the thing is, I don't think he was anonymous on that blog, but isn't it so much of how we communicate now, just us complaining on various platforms, whether in person or online through Twitter or whatever, just us complaining about how things are and what things happen and this, that, and the third.
Yeah, we all have, freedom of speech is a constitutional right. As a government employee, you're entitled to that. Now, I think there's, and I can't really speak on it from an expert perspective because I was never in the military, but I would think in the military is probably a little bit tighter than working as a civilian in the government, in the sense of, I think they probably curtail kind of what you can say and do while you're on the job. And for me, my take on the military is that it seems like they're always on the job. You're always kind of representing, your branch that you support. So my guess is that they're probably a little bit more stringent as far as what they can say or do. In the workplace, in the civilian government, you do have that right of free speech. And with the gentleman that we talked about, it drives management crazy. So, but as long as he's not being violating what we call conduct issues, where he's being rude or being putting blasphemy on individuals or whatever, he has a right to say his opinion. And pretty much he's saying management sucks. You really can't hold that against him.
Yeah.
To do it. But I think probably in government and in the military, they probably could hold him accountable and kind of stop him from saying it. But free speech is still something that, as a government employee, you can do. About the business of the government, though, and that's an internal blog that, there's certain information that's sensitive or otherwise classified as sensitive or higher, you can never leak sensitive information, even internally. So as long as you're kind of spouting your opinion, but when you start getting into the business of the organization and you spout information that's sensitive that you shouldn't be sharing outside of a need to know basis, then you can be kind of held to some kind of conduct or disciplinary action for doing that. So you don't have complete free speech. They have what they call the Whistleblower Act when you think about Snowden and guys like that.
Yeah.
Where there is a protocol on how, if you see fraud, waste, or abuse in government, as a government employee, you're obligated to report it. And there are ways that there's a process that you have to go through to report that and kind of make those things known. And that process is not, kind of pushing it to the media.
Yeah.
That's never the process.
That's it's funny you mentioned that as well. There's in San Francisco in Nancy Pelosi's district, she has her first Democratic challenger in almost her entire career of being in senator, and it's this guy named Shahid Buttar. He's mind you, he got the same amount of votes in 2018 that AOC did in the Bronx, so he does have support in that city. But what he was basically saying,
Republican challenger?
No, he's a Democratic.
So he challenged
first Democratic challenger.
Wow.
But he's gaining steam just because of a lot of the stuff that Pelosi is pulling or whatever. But he's a constitutional lawyer, and that was his thing. And he was arrested in 2015 on the Senate floor, among other things. But his kind of main area is like surveillance and whistleblowing and those things like that. And it reminds me that Snowden, he didn't work, he was a contractor.
That's right.
He didn't work directly
right.
for the government. Yeah. And, that ties in what we were saying earlier about what if Deloitte was spilling information from other people.
Well, they're held to the same, as a government contractor, you're held to the same standards as a government employee.
Right.
So, and those and same restrictions as well. But, I think that there's a place for that, and I think that it's appropriate because to me, sometimes when you want to change things, change by definition is disruptive. And frankly, I like to see, not just in government, but just in general, I like to see more folks kind of challenge the status quo.
Yeah. I think there's a generation of people like Buttar. Yeah. I think AOC and the whole squad was, at least from the left, is of that group. And I think that's why they're so significant in that way. But the guy Sharp as Attack, I would highly recommend you look him up and watch them. And because, I mean, man, he's impressive. But one of his main points was that whistleblowing, there's a whole process and stuff like that. And to your point, like, the media it's not every day that every sort of like whistleblown thing, spills out into the public and is picked up by the news. I'm not sure if the guy's name was David Webb or something like that. Apparently he was an investigative journalist who had found like proof, like in paper, that the CIA had been pumping drugs across the border into Miami and Los Angeles, and that the CIA had trained gangs in those South American countries because they had run coups through those countries, and they were saying that they trained them to kill people in those cities, which then gave the government almost permission to bring armored vehicles and different types of equipment and stuff like that into those cities.
U.S. cities?
Into U.S. cities.
Wow.
Because it was supposed to be the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But so if these gang members or whatever that the U.S. trained were going and killing police officers, of course the people have cause, to anybody who didn't know any of the context, there's a lot of cause to have, protection for these people. But what it ended up doing, it ended up people of color, Black people, Latinos or whatever, ended up participating in a market that was started and, cycled through in those cities by the CIA.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that.
But that guy had basically leaked that. And his story was stomped on, very similar to how the Tara Reid thing, the allegations for Joe Biden recently had been stomped on for months, and they're not going to talk about it at all. So anybody, at least with politics, it seems, in government, it's like the people on top can't, it's like they're impervious to having things happen. And we know from Trump and from all these people that Trump was just an exposal. He was an exfoliator of all the stuff that had been happening underneath the surface. We see that all these different people have these things going on. But it's when you go through the natural process of it, if you try to make change in that way, you're hit with a natural resistance of the establishment and the traditionalists and all of those things.
Do you think that people really want to know? I guess, do we want to know the unvarnished, naked truth of things?
I think some people don't.
Yeah.
As you can continue.
No, I was finished. I was asking.
Yeah, I think that some people would rather be able to just live their lives without anything getting in their way, no government getting in their way, being able to do what they want, say what they want, or whatever. I think that's the view of most conservatives right now. I don't want anything. This is why people don't want to wear masks, that they think it's an infringement on their rights. It doesn't make sense to me, but that they don't want the government in any way to get in their way. I mean, they want to be able to live, and I think both sides want that as well. But I think that when it's something that, and these people when it's something that big, and these people are putting people in jail, and they're making policy based on like these, making policy and continuing to, to gather wealth and all of these things. I think it is up to those people to kind of expose them in that way. I think people need to hear it, even if they don't want to. Just on the basis of justice, you should be able to read the facts and see for yourself.
Yeah, I believe that I fashion myself to be an optimist, and I do think that this is the greatest country on the planet. I don't think I want to live in it, but I don't think any person, organization, country, nation state, whatever, gets to a point where they're the most powerful thing on the block without, really doing some really, shady stuff.
Yeah.
Right. I just don't think that that's possible.
Yeah.
When you talk about the captains of industry, billionaire, trillionaire, you definitely leave dead bodies in the wake. And there's a lot of, my view, people that have been, undercut or feel like they've been undercut or hurt or kind of stomped on to, for folks to kind of get to the top. I don't know if there's any other way. In this country, we have these ideals around kind of how we see ourselves as being above a lot of the fray, but I don't know if you can compete in this world, let alone dominate, like the United States has done and continues to do in so many different ways. Playing fair and square and living up to the ideals that you espouse. I just don't know if it's possible. And, I think a lot of people, when they really sat and thought about it, to your point, I think some people just don't want to know. They just rather ignorance is bliss, right? So I rather believe what I believe and hope that, that everything's, exactly like it should be. And we would never, do stuff like that, like, train people to kill our own citizens and to conduct illegal activities and have that sanctioned by the government.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that we have done a lot of that stuff and continue to do a lot of that stuff as a country, as with every other country.
Yeah. We know the history now of colonization and all those things, but I mean, what England did was a perfect example of that. You can argue, you can make an argument. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a very like a anti-government or anything like that, but you can argue that the companies through globalization and having people and children in China and India working on and making their products is kind of what we're talking about, like the same level of like we are doing things that we don't do within our borders, but we will allow other places to do them for us because their standards are different and their culture is different.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And somehow they're less than, and so those same rules and ideals don't apply to them, even though they're supposed to be the rules and ideals that we espouse and live by. So, but then shouldn't that apply beyond our borders?
You would think.
Which kind of brings me to one of my favorite topics with immigration.
Yeah.
And like for me, I can't, understand how a country that's built based on immigrants would ever be in a position to deny other immigrants and to select immigrants to come through. I mean, I've always struggled with kind of getting my head around that. I get it from a standpoint that resources are scarce. I get it that as citizens, we pay taxes, and make other contributions to society, that should give us the right to enjoy the fruits of that society. But I think these immigrants that are coming here, they're paying taxes in their own way. They're contributing to the society. Yeah, there's always going to be a bad segment of any group of people. There's always going to be people that are going to be, criminals and do things that we don't want. But, a country that's built, that's foundational for us. It's a country of immigrants.
Yeah.
How can we deny and self-select? There has to be a better way.
I think that goes along with the idea that the people in power, it goes back to why some people can get jobs and other people can't.
Mm-hmm.
I've moved through living. It seems like a lot of things it's not what you know and how much you know, it's who you know. Yeah. So and we know that power, runs in small circles, and for the most part, it's like you have to kind of be one of us. You have to be you have to be in our group, or we have to consider you one of us in order to kind of bring you in. And quite often when people don't look like other people, or where they speak differently than other people, then there's then that line gets blurred, and you're not one of us. You're different. I don't understand you. I'm not going to make any effort to understand you. Therefore, I am cutting you out, and you don't belong.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is driven by fear. Personally, I think that we fear what we don't know, and as human beings, is a natural reaction to kind of blame. I find it to be to be more evolved is to be able to kind of look inward and self-assess first. How can I contribute and do something better, as opposed to reflecting out, I can't do this or I don't have that because of this person, because of this situation. How did I contribute to that? What can I do differently to achieve my goals? There could be some outside forces that's impacting it, but what part do I play? And I think too often people don't look, in that mirror and say, do that self-assess, that self-inventory to say, okay, how am I contributing to this and what can I do to get myself out of it? Which is why the whole concept of liberal and conservative is something that, I can never really espouse to, because I think they're all they're all constructs, political constructs that kind of defy logic for me.
Yeah.
On the one hand, how can I say that, I'm against, abortions because we're killing human beings, but yet I'm for the death penalty? To me, that just doesn't equate. And it's like, well, the babies didn't, babies didn't do anything wrong. These folks did things that they deserved to die, but do I fundamentally believe that a right that, that in any circumstance should we ever extinguish a life? How far do you take it? Where do you draw the line? What's the definition of that? To me, those are all constructs.
Yeah. And built on what? Some are built in religion, some are built in communities. I through the internet, I think these walls between the communities have done two things, like exponentially. Like, they've built communities up, and you can meet somebody in Seattle or Hong Kong through the internet and be on the same wavelength, the same level as them. But at the same time, I find that a lot of people who are ignorant in this way, or who are kind of within these constructs, just project what they know and assume that everything else is horse crap, or that doesn't make sense because this is my community, this is my bubble, this is what I know. I'm right because I know this. Yeah,
we're not open in those situations. We're often, as human beings, not open to any other possibilities. We become very dogmatic, in our approach and in our beliefs, right? And so, like, to your point, you can't possibly be right. There's not room for both of us to kind of have a rational and acceptable viewpoint. We kind of have to be in agreement. If we're in disagreement, then you got to be right and I got to be wrong, or vice versa. We both just can't have a point. So can we just be? I have this perspective, you have that perspective. It's just a matter of opinion. It's not grounded in right or wrong. It's grounded in preference and perception and what just kind of how we see things. And people have different views, and accepting that and figuring out okay, even though we disagree, not even so much about finding common ground, but just kind of having respect for the other position and recognizing that there's just not one right way or wrong way.
That's a great point. And to that end, I had thought, this kind of plays into what you do, and it may be in the government sector for now, among other ways, but you've always described yourself as a change agent, or a person to kind of drive that, knowing that this way that we're talking about is a way, and it should be the way that we kind of go about and we do things. But we can't, there, a lot of times it's just kind of more of the same. Like, this is how we react between people. We cannot agree. We cannot ever agree to disagree. It doesn't exist. I can't just respect you as a person, even though that you're different. How, like, how do we as a society, and like starting even in a small business or all these places, how do we change that? And we can start small and then and expand out. But for you, I mean, all these books on your wall, Lean In is one we've been talking about recently, and change management and all of those things. How do you think your career ties, and your passion for kind of taking things that that can be better and bringing them to the level that they're supposed to be at?
Yeah, well, what comes to mind, what comes up for me initially is experience is a great teacher. But tenure does not equal experience. One of my mentors had an expression which I love, and he says, you can have 25 years of experience, or you can have 1 year experience 25 times. So, and the key fundamental thing behind that is, I think the answer to your question is the ability and willingness to learn. You can't change. Change is about learning something different, learning to do, think, act, be something different than what you already are. That's not necessarily taken away. You're not transforming completely from where you are. I like to think of it oftentimes as a build. You're expanding who you are, right? And so regardless of our age, regardless of our education, income level, where we live, we all as human beings have the capability to learn. Are we willing to kind of apply that to our lives? Not just going to school and learn our ABCs, but just learning about people, learning about life, learning about, different perspectives, seeking to understand others and others' perspective without judgment, which is very hard to do. Oftentimes when we talk as human beings, most of us, we're having a conversation. Most of us are not really listening to understand the person that we're talking to. We're waiting, like jump rope, for our turn to talk next, So it's like, so learning is really the key, and the willingness to want to learn. And in that comes, what a lot of learning is discomfort, we were talking about, political views, kind of really seeking to understand a different political view, for example, that I vehemently disagree with, and it kind of just gets me riled up to my soul. How can I understand any kind of functioning human being having this political position? I just don't get it, but really trying to get it, to really suspend judgment for a moment and try to put yourself in that person's shoes and kind of understand so you can learn. And in that learning comes a different perspective, which kind of leads to different actions. So
that's an excellent point. And I'm curious how that ties in to you. I mean, what is it about your upbringing or what you've seen in the time that you've had to be this person in various organizations that makes you intrinsically want to do this for other people and want people to kind of see this light?
Yeah. I've learned to be, by necessity, through experience, I call it open to the possibilities. and basically what I mean by that, kind of growing up, as you know, I had a really rough childhood growing up. My mother was really hard on us. A lot of things we would contribute as abuse today was kind of how we lived. And one of the things that it taught me was, and I mentioned that I was an optimist, so I was always looking, doing a self-inventory. How can I survive and thrive in any given situation, no matter how harsh or how comfortable? How can I survive and thrive in it? So I was always looking for ways to be, and I learned that I needed to be open. I needed to be open to truly understand the situation, where the other person or people were coming from, and then how can I leverage that so I can thrive within it? And that's really kind of helped me adapt and adjust myself. And over time, I learned to kind of adjust myself to a given situation. So I come in and assess things and I adjust what I need to do to kind of move things forward. And then it gets to a point when, with anything, it begins with self-mastery, and then you kind of evolve from there. Is you can kind of look at it as concentric circles. So one learns to master oneself, then you want to master an interpersonal thing, another one-on-one situation. Then you want to learn to master being in a small group, and then a larger group, then in a community, then in a society, then globally. Most of us, you think Nelson Mandela, you think Barack Obama, you think Abraham Lincoln, a lot of examples of folks that are global citizens that have mastered and had an impact. Mother Teresa across the world, had Gandhi, one of my favorites, is another. A lot of us don't evolve to that, but it's the same level of thinking, right? It's like, how do we kind of master self and then start to influence and help others kind of master their environment as well. And so then it comes down to intention. So what's one's intention? Is it to kind of get personal gain and, at the detriment of others, and sometimes you can't avoid that because sometimes it is a zero-sum game. It's a win-loss kind of proposition. But to the extent, so how can, we create a situation collectively where we're all kind of benefiting from and moving people around? And to me, that's the definition of change. It's something that, you do as a collective for a greater good where multiple people benefit. But it all comes back to being open to the possibilities and figuring out, again, having a goal, figuring out how do we make the best of a situation, or how do we achieve a goal or whatever it is that we want to do? How do we do that? How do we make that happen?
Yeah. And on that idea, specifically in the environments of the small group and, and going on to the bigger organizations, what is an understanding of people and a willingness to kind of learn about who they are, and learn about the organization in general? How does that contribute to like really being able to make effective change?
There has to be a superordinate goal. There has to be something that everybody can buy into. There has to be something that binds and connects everyone together. And by definition, an organization, be it a school, a church, a business, a government agency, there's a central purpose, of why the organization exists. And everybody in one way, shape, or form buys into that on some level, which is why they're there. If I join a church, my the central purpose of that church is to worship, get closer to, understand a higher order with God, Jehovah, Allah, what have you, right? So that's the central purpose. And so it's about, okay, so how can we all contribute to being more God-like, contributing, being more spiritual, whatever, however words you want to define that. How can we all benefit from that and contribute to kind of delivering that for the church, right? And so it's reminding people of that superordinate goal, getting clarity on that, because then that kind of raises us above our own parochial interests, feelings, perceptions, desires, and it kind of raises us to be higher. When people join the military, as the Air Force, I hear things like, in the Air Force, everybody's blue, in the Army, everybody's green, Navy, everybody's blue, what have you. There's a greater cause that bonds us together. So you got to have that first, and you got to remind people of that, because, one of my colleagues once said to me, we're working in an organization where, there's a lot of disgruntled people, and we're thinking about it, and then people come in the organization and, and then quickly they're just like everybody else. They just kind of get caught up in the culture and they become disgruntled and all that. And he said, no one comes to work wanting to be miserable and not do a good job. We all come into a situation, be it a family, be it a church, be it a job, trying to contribute to that greater good. And then somewhere along the way, because of the culture, interaction with people, some of us get, we kind of lose our way, and we become disgruntled or, so it's about reminding people, here's why you're here. And so it's the bigger goal and subordinate goal. And then it's showing people what's in it for them. Because at the end of the day, we are individuals. And so I have to be getting something out of anything, relationship, being a part of an organization, to keep doing it. And sometimes the things that I'm getting out of it are not good for me. Sometimes people are motivated by negative reinforcement, and there are negative things that are not in their best interest, but that's the thing that motivates and keeps them coming back, and that's a whole nother conversation. They need counseling or what have you, but that's what happens, so it's really about those two things. It's like, here's the big goal, here's what we're trying to achieve, here's what we're about, here's the purpose, trying to elevate oneself to that. And then by elevating yourself to this is what you're going to get out of it. Showing people that, and getting people to kind of buy into that and moving towards that, moving in that same direction, towards that same mission, kind of gets things moving, and thereby you make change. But absolutely, people have to get something out of it for themselves, and helping them to kind of discover that is really cool. And people want to be part of things that are good, things that are great, things that are cool, so a lot of it is making these things great, good, and cool so that people want to be a part of it, and it's just that simple, but it's also just as hard. It's very difficult to do.
Why do you think you get such a fulfillment about out of doing that in business and beyond?
Yeah, it's about, I think each individual, each human being has a purpose, has an intrinsic purpose that they're born with on why they exist. I truly believe that, and I think it's about finding one's purpose and being real clear on it. And for me, it was well into my 40s before I realized what my purpose was. And although I had been my entire life kind of nibbling around it, but getting that clarity on why I'm on the planet, what is it about me that I'm supposed to contribute to the human race is the big thing. And for me, it's all about developing people. It's all about taking people and helping them grow and be more and better than who they are. And that's not always a fun journey for myself or for the folks I'm trying to help with that. But that's my mission. And, that's my singular soul intrinsic purpose. And once I became clear on that, then it's real easy. It's real easy. You reference the Sheryl Sandberg, but it's real easy to lean in, but an inkling of what one's purpose is, or what are the things that you keep gravitating to that you just can't get away from. You keep finding yourself in these situations, or you keep finding yourself doing a certain thing. That's nibbling around what your purpose is. And when I think we find that as individuals, then I think we become real clear and we become real effective at kind of having an impact on others, because we're so clear on what we're here for. And it builds on our strengths and our passions. It pulls all of that together. And so it doesn't become a job or a hobby. It becomes a calling, and it's just a question of choosing where I want to kind of put my calling into play. What field do I want to, do I want to work on my calling, and, what aspects of my life do I want to leverage it and use it for my calling? And I think the sooner we find our purpose, the better. Hopefully it won't take most people, over 40 years on the planet to find theirs, but it's always there. It's always there.
Yeah. And I also want to mention an analogy that you brought up to me before about the Rubik's Cube, about the interplay of different people can be kind of correlated with the box, or the different sides with the different colors can be different parts of the organizations. Each cube can be a different person, but the essence of figuring that whole thing out and figuring it out is working with it as a whole, as opposed to with as a on one side or on another. And maybe because of your purpose and maybe what brought you to this, what brought you to where you're at, you kind of have that holistic view of the entire Rubik's Cube, or you have the ability to see those things, which help you to contribute and get fulfillment out of seeing everything being figured out.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, and that's part of kind of knowing who you are. Because even as a young kid, I was always one of those people that kind of like to take a step back and take it all in and see how it's all connected. And later on in my life, when you become educated and get experience with things, and you can apply terms to kind of what you do. And, one of the terms is that they call it systems thinking or holistic thinking, being able to kind of see the whole. And then a piece of that is then being able to, seeing the whole is one thing. Another part of it is being able to make the connections between things that don't seem otherwise connected, and so when you can see there's the obvious connections that we all see, and then there's the not so obvious connections, and they all kind of hold, in the metaphor you're using, the Rubik's Cube, it holds it together, and so if you take apart a Rubik's Cube, you'll see that there's this T-shaped apparatus that is connecting all the different pieces. That's the part that you don't see. The part that you do see, but understanding the physics of that kind of helps you solve the Rubik's Cube. The parts of the cube that you do see are the different size, and the different sizes are supposed to be different colors. And there are 9 squares on each side, and, idea to get the 9 colors for the same, the same colors on the same side all the way around the cube, and that's the part that you do see. So how does that all kind of work together? And so you can kind of play with it, you can kind of play with it, and I hope that you figure it out over time. And then those folks who kind of solve it, figure out that there's an approach. And so several approaches to kind of solving it. And that's where most people never get to, is really having the clarity on your purpose. You can see you can see it from a holistic standpoint. You know how things are connecting. That helps you have clarity on figuring out then how to solve the problem and get the cube to be all in the same, place. And then once you get it, once you figure it out again, going to clarity, then you're able to do it faster and faster and faster. It becomes automatic and real easy. And so you see some of these people that can solve Rubik's Cubes in a matter of seconds. They've done it so much, they know all the different permutations on kind of how to solve the cube. They can do it literally blindfolded and do it in a matter of seconds. And so, because you're building up that muscle, which kind of goes back to the experience piece. You've got to take the right experience to kind of do it to achieve the goal, which is solving the cube. I mentioned the experience 25 times, having 1 year experience 25 times, or 25 years of experience. Being able to solve the cube and have that clarity is 25 years of experience. Every time picking up a cube and not having any kind of idea, any kind of logic on how to solve it and just playing with it is the 1 year of experience 25 times. And so as human beings, we all kind of, are really good and kind of master some things, then other things we don't. So we all kind of fit in that bucket in one way or another. But when, you have that kind of clarity around what your core purpose is and that ability to be effective within it, you can do that in any environment. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, it's been an hour.
Oh, wow. Cool beans.
Well, this was great. Well, thanks you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. Appreciate it.
The book is coming soon. I'll plug all the social media and all that in the description for all these things, but yeah, that's about it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Have a good one.